All right, the case of the kidnapped candy. This is chapter 3, a blank page. Nicole Rodriguez decided to write a limerick about her goldfish, Goldie. Addie Becker was writing an ode to baseball and Albert Pujols. Mila was working on a poem about spaghetti and meatballs. And me? On Tuesday, I decided to write about grape juice. Wednesday, I switched to jigsaw puzzles. Wednesday night, I changed my mind again. And then on Thursday morning, I was changing my mind more often than the traffic light changes colors. By Thursday night, I was desperate. The poem was due on Friday, but all I had to show for the week was a blank sheet of paper. Maybe I could tell Mrs. Gleason I had come up with a new kind of poem, the invisible kind. I knew what the problem was. Every time I started thinking about my poem, I ended up thinking about our surprise. I wanted to know what was under that sheet. I needed to know. It was too big to be a pile of comic books. It was too small to be a sled. It was too quiet to be a class pet. I was stumped. Mrs. Gleason wasn't handing out any more hints, and she had told us not to peek under the sheet. She just kept saying we'd have to wait and see. Grown-ups love to wait and see. Don't ask me why. I flopped down on my bed. My dog Rags jumped up next to me. He stuck his cold, wet nose into my hand. Then he wiped his tongue up the side of my face. Slurp. What should I write about, Rags? I asked. He didn't know either. He just wagged his tail and plopped his head down on my chest. That's Rags for you. He's always there when I need him. He's the best friend a guy could have. That was it. I hopped out of my bed and ran to my desk. I grabbed a pencil, I squinched up my eyes and bent over the blank page. I wrote and wrote. I crossed things out and scribbled away. An hour later, I was curled up in bed, fast asleep. My poem was tucked away in my backpack, safe and sound, and it was perfect. Chapter 4, Kidnapped. The next morning, we read our poems out loud. Nicole Rodriguez went first. There was once a goldfish named Goldie. I loved her, and I know she loved me. The day that she died, my mom threw her outside so the bowl wouldn't get gross and moldy. Next came Biggs Maloney. When springtime comes, I like to smell all the flowers people sell. Roses and carnations too, red and yellow, pink and blue. When I grow up, I want to be a wrestler or a florist, see? I'll have my own big flower place, and if you laugh, I'll smash your face. Oh, I tried not to laugh. I tried really hard. When a guy as big as Biggs Maloney writes a love poem about flowers, the smartest thing you can do is keep quiet. But sometimes it's hard to be smart. Mike Radcliffe read his poem about dirt bikes. Danica Starling read a poem about her dad. I shifted around in my seat. I couldn't wait until it was my turn, and then finally it was. My poem was a haiku. That meant it had to have 17 syllables. 5 syllables in the first line and the last line, and 7 syllables in the middle. It was short, just like me. Rags eats, sleeps, and drools. Not the smartest dog ever, but he's my best friend. So if you clap it out, that's the syllables. Rags eats, sleeps, and drools. 5 syllables on the first line, 7 on the second. Not the smartest dog ever, but he's my best friend. But he's my best friend. So 5, 7, 5. Then I showed the class the picture I drew of Rags chewing on a bone. That was lovely, Jigsaw, Miss Gleason said. You are all such wonderful poets. You deserve a special treat, something I love very much. She walked over to the pink flowered sheet. She grabbed it. We all held our breath. Surprise! She exclaimed, whipping the sheet away. There was dead silence. On the corner of Miss Gleason's desk sat a giant gumball machine. And inside the gumball machine, there was a whole lot of nothing much. Surprise! We'll do one more chapter. Chapter 5. Chocolate-covered clues. Miss Gleason's face went from confused to mad to sad. It took about 10 seconds. On Monday, I filled this with Hershey's Kisses, she said sternly. Where did they go? No one said anything. Most people looked down at their desks. Athena raised her hands. I have an idea, she said. Jigsaw is a detective. Maybe he could figure out where the candy went. Miss Gleason nodded, and just like that, Mila and I had a new case. I pulled out my detective notebook and my favorite red marker. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "A case of the kidnapped candy." At recess, Mila and I stayed inside the classroom and went on a hunt for clues. Being a detective sometimes means giving up recess. Mila searched the room while I checked out the scene of the crime. There was nothing suspicious on Miss Gleason's desk, nothing on her chair, and then I saw a crumpled up silver wrapper under the desk. I found something, I called to Mila. I did too, she called back from the cubbies. So I grabbed the wrapper and hurried over to her. I held out my hand, palm side up. She did the same. We stared down at a matching pair of silver wrappers. My eyes widened. Where'd you find yours? She pointed toward one of the cubbies. I looked up to see the name taped to the wall. Mike Radcliffe, our first suspect. I found something else, too, Mila said. She handed me a scrap of lined paper. Meter, the rhythm of a poem. So? I asked. It's part of our poetry vocabulary homework. Turn it over, Mila suggested. I did. There was a brown smudge on the back. A familiar-looking smudge. I brought it to my nose and took a big whiff. Chocolate. I pulled out my detective journal. Mila and I listed all the clues we had found. Then it was time to make our list of suspects. Mike Radcliffe, I wrote. What about Bobby Solofsky? Mila asked. I nodded. Earlier that week I heard Solofsky bragging that he knew what was under the sheet. I ignored him, like I always do. But now it made me wonder. Besides, Solofsky digs up trouble like Rags digs up bones. Anyone else? I asked, hoping there wasn't. Our list was long enough. Joey, Mila said. He was the board cleaner this week. That means he was in the classroom every day after school. And you know Joey. I sighed and wrote down his name. I did know Joey. He's a great guy, but he's also the kind of guy who would sell his mother for an Oreo cookie. Who knew what he would do for a gumball machine full of Hershey's Kisses? That's it, I said, closing the notebook. At the last minute, Mila stuck her finger between the pages. One more suspect, she insisted. She flipped the notebook open again. Miss Gleason. What? I yelped. Are you crazy? Why would she kidnap her own candy? She did say she loved it more than anything, Mila pointed out. Maybe she didn't want to share. And you did find a wrapper under her desk. I was sure Miss Gleason was innocent, but I wrote her name down anyway. There's one thing I've learned as a detective. Anything can happen. And usually, it does.